today we have a special guest to talk about Veterans Affairs, and that's Joe Bello, who has certainly made a name for himself over in New York City. So, Joe, for those people that on this side of the river that might not be familiar with your work, just give us a brief introduction.
All right. Well, I'm first and foremost, I'm a Navy veteran. I served 11 years in the Navy, got out, and this was pre 9/11. So, a lot of the advocacy was built around what was going on with the Vietnam veterans. So a lot of my mentors early on were Vietnam veterans. So I started doing a lot of advocacy around simple things at first, like getting the POW flag up at City Hall, trying to increase the Veterans Advisory Board, and a host of other things, getting around the 5 boroughs, seeing who the veterans are, what the issues are on the ground. Then we get to about roughly 2014, 2015, and there's a big push by myself and a bunch of others to get the city to recognize that with the amount of veterans that are in New York City and the greater New York City area, we need an agency. We needed an agency, and we were able to push. And with the assistance of the City Hall, I should say the City Council, and a number of council members, in particular Councilman Eric Woolrich at the time, the chair of the Veterans Committee, we were able to get it done. And so we have an agency. While we were doing that, we were able to increase the number of Veterans Advisory Board members to the commissioner and the mayor from 8 to 11. We were able to establish veteran courts in each of the 5 boroughs. And so, we've kind of moved on a lot of issues. I mean, there are more issues to tackle. Certainly homelessness has been one of them. We've driven down homelessness here in the city, but we still have it. Certainly mental health, and then everything around COVID.
All right, thanks, Joe. And before we move forward, just want to say hello and thanks to Commander Mack. Thanks for joining us again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much, John. And it's just a blessing to be here with Joe Bello. He's really been a mentor to so many people throughout the greater NYC and North Jersey areas in the veteran space. And it's a real pleasure to be here tonight with both of you.
All right, sure. No problem, Troy. So, Joe, obviously everyone that knows you knows that, again, your work is in New York City. So why did you want to make it a point to get your message out there and just speak to some of the North Jersey, specifically the Hudson County, brethren out here? Why did you want to make that something a priority?
Well, I think for all of us, and with Troy as well, we're neighbors. A lot of the issues that affect the city. I mean, we have a lot of people that come in to the city to work, and vice versa. People that live in Jersey, people that live in Manhattan or any of the boroughs go into Jersey. So we have a lot of overplay, and a lot of them are veterans. Plus, there is a lot of civilians that I would say probably don't know much about veterans issues other than like the VA serves us. And so I think it's important that we recognize, like, we are tri-state area, we're brothers right there. So, the issues that affect you guys sometimes, most times will affect us as well, and vice versa.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of our members in our various veteran service organizations, the movement of their jobs, their families, their social lives, their religious lives, etc., don't necessarily take into consideration invisible lines on a map. For us at Weehawken American Legion Post 18, more than a few of our members work in the city, reside here in Hudson County, and being able to communicate and coordinate between populations so we have best practices, best techniques, and best policy is really something that we're hoping to focus more on, because the need is there, and we have populations that will benefit from learning and seeing what was accomplished throughout this region, and then hopefully implementing a positive best practice regardless of where one lives, if that meets the needs of vulnerable populations.
All right, thanks. So with that, guys, just let's start with this. So Troy, what do you think is something that NYC does really well with their commitment to veterans, their Veterans Affairs, that you would like to see more of here at Hudson? And Joe, the opposite for you. What's something you think that, you think is going really well here at Hudson that you would like to see implemented in the NYC area?
I'll let Troy start.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we see, and Joe played a big part of this along with others, was really nurturing a strong, diverse veteran space. Now, the opportunity to bring in a variety of different organizations, each with a distinct mission that takes the potential that we see in our veterans to lead, to build, to train, and to execute good, effective works on behalf of others, to take all that potential and then apply veterans leadership skills and team building skills to specific issues that are at work in each of our communities, well, that's something we could really benefit from here in Hudson County. We take a look at what Mission Continues achieves in terms of community uplift work, organizing leadership opportunities for veterans to answer the call to service in their own neighborhoods. We take a look at the Travis Manion Foundation and the work that they do in terms of character building and character education in schools and youth groups. We take a look at Veterans for American Ideals and the advocacy there to build a civil discourse around fundamental democratic principles. These are all things that are going on right now in areas surrounding Hudson County, and that with just a little bit of intentionality, we could help foster in our own neighborhoods. And I think that we have the relationships at play, and we certainly have the potential in our veterans population to excel at building community, building teams, and putting our veterans to work for the benefits of the Hudson County residents.
And Troy's absolutely right. I would say that one of the issues I think for Hudson is like the veterans from what I've seen out there are somewhat siloed. They're basically within their own group, their own, like whether it's the Legion, whether it's VFW, whether it's whatever the group is, and yet the issues kind of transcend the silos because they, whether it's homelessness, housing, or moving into any of those other kind of issues, and yet it's difficult to get everybody together or to identify who those leaders are to try to get something done. And you really need people like Troy and those who are really in that leadership space to it makes it difficult to get them all wrangled together and on the same page. So I think that's one of the challenges certainly for Jersey, for Northern Jersey side.
Got it. So when, Joe, when you're thinking about, a policy initiative that would affect the whole tri-state area, what is your first course of action when you're going to need to collaborate with somebody like Troy? And, what do you guys do when you have to work on a broader policy or perspective issue?
Well, I think first and foremost would be, just to throw this off the top of my head, would be homelessness. So we talk about homelessness, and that's an issue that affects the entire nation, whether it's veteran homelessness or regular homelessness. But it's an issue that we're, each side of the river is always talking about. It's consistently there. And so the question is, how do we build that? How do we, as advocates and people who are on the ground and see those veterans who are homelessness, whether it's through, mental health issues or substance abuse issues or any other kind of issues, particularly around COVID, how do we work with our city partners, our county partners? How do we address the message? And then how do we get those elected officials to move on the message and kind of bring everybody together to say, this is an issue. But right now, everybody agrees that's an issue. But the question is, like, when you get to a point where, like here in New York City, we significantly reduced homelessness by a large amount, but we still have a couple of hundred homeless veterans in the city. It's when you get to that point, how do you drive down those numbers? How does somebody like Troy, myself, and other veterans in the space work together to say to our elected officials, it's not over. You can take the bow, you can take the, all the, kudos that you want, but we haven't finished the mission yet. And I think that's what's really important, getting everyone on that same page to kind of continue that mission.
And that's a really good point that you make there on that, Joe. Here in Hudson County, for my money, for my bet, the single best story of the past several years, the most heartwarming story, is the creation of the Homeless Veterans Home at Hoboken American Legion Post 107. The work that Commander John Carey and the rest of the Legionnaires out there to transition their post, which facility was destroyed in Superstorm Sandy, and turn that into housing units for veterans is just an extraordinary tale. And we see on that issue the opportunity for veteran skills and expertise to be activated and turned into something that benefits everybody in that neighborhood in Hoboken. And at the same time, we saw here in the North Hudson area the past several years, veterans joining in and supporting the Hudson County Alliance to End Homelessness's efforts for the annual point in time count, where veterans from across our area pound those pavements on one of the coldest days in January each year to make sure not just veterans who are homeless are heard, but that all those residents who are in need of shelter are heard and have their needs addressed at local, state, and federal levels. The question then becomes, if we have this area of expertise in the veteran space, if we have this area of passion in the veteran space, how can we take those veterans and give them more platforms in order to serve and help our neighbors and communities? How do we resource them for success so we can be an answer to the problems confronting us?
Yeah, and just to add in, in doing that, we need to bring in more people as well. And this is where you start to have the conversation about grooming leadership, about having people who, this is something that they feel passionate about, that they want to contribute to. How do you groom them? How do you get them into the space? Because again, it can be challenging. There can be a lot of people that just feel, we don't need you, we don't want you. And that's not the right answer. We need to be as inclusive as possible to try to bring everybody in, because, obviously, it's always said, the more numbers, the better it is, the better we can get things done.
And John, that goes to the conversation you had last week with some of our Legionnaires here at Weehawken American Legion Post 18, in that sense of isolation, when you know that you have the potential to make a difference, but you don't see the road ahead, you don't see the avenue to serve, you don't see the platform through which to make a difference. That's one of the things that exacerbates poor mental health, not just within the veteran space, but across all those wonderful populations that could make a difference if they were just given a chance to try.
Right, sure. But with that said, guys, I mean, I know there's a lot of issues that, have no bounds, like homelessness. But actually what I meant is if there was some sort of policy initiative that had broader implications, whether it's the tri-state area, nationwide, or beyond, I was just wondering how you get in touch and how you guys decide, who's going to take point on this person's going to take point on that. We're going to go to this meeting, let's say at the New York City Council versus going to the Jersey City Council. How do you guys just plan it out, map it out from A to Z was more what I was getting.
If I can take a swing at this, Joe, because I think it's something that you helped lead the way on. Joe had just mentioned grooming future leaders. Every single of the 12 municipalities of Hudson County and the county itself has a variety of boards and councils that make up the nature of governing in our republic and in this democracy. One of the things that Joe and others you have fought for is creating opportunities for veterans to serve on boards and councils and various organs of government. There's an intentionality that's needed there. There are opportunities, whether they be on your local library board, on the zoning and planning boards, on a range of councils that are convened and coalitions that are convened at the municipal and county levels. Our veterans could contribute greatly to those deliberations. And Joe, I think that's something that you and others over in the boroughs have done really well about at least trying to introduce people to that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things, we have a New York City Veterans Advisory Board that advises the Commissioner of Veteran Services and the Mayor and the Speaker, but we also have some borough presidents have Veterans Advisory Councils. We have some district attorneys that have veteran boards that advise them as well. So there's plenty of opportunity. I think if you're looking for opportunity, it's there. I think it really comes down to the people that are already sitting in the seat. So, like for myself, example, I've been on the city's Veterans Advisory Board for a number of years now, but I recognize the fact that, look, I can't stay on that board forever. It's a great resume filler, but, I don't want to stay on it forever because you've got to give other people the opportunity to step up to want to do the job as well, or get the knowledge of what that position entails. So I think it really comes down to like bringing them in, getting them involved, finding a path for something that they're interested in, but at the same time, grooming them to take over the next generation of leadership that will come in and take over and move the ball forward.
Okay. So as far as like advocating on an issue, like let's again just use your previous example of homelessness. Let's just say, your Legion wanted to team up with the Weehawken Legion, and I'm sure probably a dozen others in the area. How would you guys just do that, and what kind of discussions would be had? Like, how would you map out, which leaders, whether they're elected or not, would be contacted? What would your approach be, I guess, based on your experience?
From my perspective, let's stick with homelessness. I think, okay, so let's say, and I'll use this as an example. Let's say Troy and I were having this conversation, and we realized that I'm looking at the city council data, Troy's looking at his data on his side of the river, and we're noticing homelessness is a big issue. Homeless veterans are spiking up, the numbers are spiking up. Okay, so now we need to come together and we need to say, okay, what is going to be the plan of action? How do we want to address this? Now we know we're going to have to go to the elected officials. We know we need to make it a problem, an issue, but we also then realize we need to be more inclusive. Troy and I are not going to be able to do this alone. It takes numbers to get it done. You want to go far, you go together. So what we probably would do is start involving some of the groups that are out there right now, bringing some veterans that are in the homeless space, that are advocating strictly in that homeless space. And I would say at some point, we would either write something up, or we would call for like a town hall meeting style or something, and try to say to everybody, look, this is the issue, this is the problem, this is what we believe. We need everybody's input. We want, what are you seeing on the ground? How do you think we can best engage our elected officials? So it is really a lot of conversation that takes place. And just to back that a little bit, I'll use another example. When we were creating the Department of Veteran Services, you had to realize we had a mayor, the current mayor, who really wasn't for it. You're creating a new agency, really wasn't for it, but the community was for it. And as a community, we were able to come together and, no matter where you were in that community, start lobbying your local elected official, particularly your city councilman, to say, hey, look, this is needed. We need this. We have veterans coming in. We've been at the Forever Wars now for a number of years. Veterans are coming in for schooling. Veterans, we're trying to drill down on the homelessness. We need a central place where these issues can be effectively worked out and addressed. And so it really became this synergy part of all of us lobbying and discussing and talking about it and writing articles about it and going to city council hearings about it. And that's really the work. I mean, it's not something that happens usually overnight. It's something that it takes a bit of time. But if you stick with it, eventually the elected officials see, look, they're not going anywhere. And this is going to be an issue that's going to be consistent. At some point, an election is going to come around. This will be an election issue. And so, and I think for elected officials and others, everyone has goodwill when it comes towards those who've served. So you kind of want to do the right thing. And it's just a question of having those conversations like, what can we do? What is the best thing? What do you want? How do we get there? How does that look for the budget in the future? I mean, all kinds of questions that eventually get kind of worked out. And then you get to the point where you've accomplished something and everybody gets to take a breath of fresh air or a deep breath before you start moving on to something else.
And we mentioned just now a lot on elected officials, but it's really what Joe just said was stakeholder building. It's stakeholder engagement. The public sector is a component of the conversation, but it's not exhaustive of the conversation. And while there are groups like 4 Block and others that help build inroads into the private sector for veterans, the nonprofit sector is a wonderful opportunity for veterans to engage and be engaged in a more deliberate way. For that issue, if we're talking about homelessness, we would have to engage the various nonprofit partners across the span of services that are dealing with homelessness, because they're the ones who are the direct service providers. And when we're talking about creating more opportunities for veterans, we really also mean creating spaces within nonprofit communities and nonprofit organizations for veterans to thrive and receive opportunities for employment down the road. So anything that we were going to do for that would have to involve robust stakeholder building and stakeholder engagement across the nonprofit sector.
That's what I was going to add in. Without the stakeholder engagement, you're not going to get anywhere. You really, you could have the best idea in the world. You could have the best, and the greatest intentions, but if you do not get stakeholder buy-in, if you cannot explain basically the who, what, when, where, why, if you can't really explain that and what is the positiveness that will come out of it, you won't get anywhere.
And John, to your point on this, if we can pivot maybe from homelessness to mental health, in all of these conversations, what we're talking about is using the strengths in the veteran space to find and resource credible messengers who are able to address the challenges confronting us. In the veteran space, we understand, we have decades now of experience in mental health and specifically suicide prevention. One of the things that could be done when we're talking about opportunities is identifying, training, and resourcing veterans to be advocates for mental health, regardless of population, that they could be trained, developed, and then be utilized as a way to build rapport, build trust, and build solutions. That's what we're talking about. So when we're talking about engaging veterans more thoroughly, it's not just the public sector. It's across the range of sectors that could probably benefit from our brethren's experience and leadership capacity.
And with that said, Troy, Joe, I just wanted to ask, when you're dealing with things in New York over there, and obviously we still have the COVID-19 public health emergency, have you found, a lot of added challenges there? Because I speak to some advocates and they actually tell me that as far as their job goes, the 9 to 5, if you will, like they actually like it better because you could communicate, on platforms like Zoom, and it's actually easier to get people involved. And others, tell me that it just isn't the same not having an in-person meeting. So I'm just curious where you fall on that spectrum and what kind of challenges COVID-19 has provided in the veteran space from what you've seen.
Well, from where I see it, I'd have to say, look, I'm one of the type of people that I absolutely believe in face-to-face. I absolutely believe seeing what's going on the ground level, what's happening. Zoom does present a lot of opportunities. I mean, I've acknowledged that. You get to see people, you're in Zooms with people that maybe you haven't seen, or that are interested in it, but it really takes away from like seeing what's going on the day-to-day, what the issues really are on the ground level, because you have to realize too, since about 61% of our population is about 60 and older, a lot of them don't have that computer literacy skill to actually be on a Zoom. And those that don't have a computer or don't have that literacy skill, they're not on a Zoom. So unless you're on the ground level seeing what's going on, you really don't know. And like one of the issues that's popped up is within food insecurity. Yeah. We've seen a lot about that. Yeah. But you see that on the ground level. You don't see that in a Zoom where somebody's saying, "Yeah, I need food." No, you really do see it when you're out on the streets in the ground level at a veteran's place. And it's a challenge. It is a challenge with COVID because obviously with the way this has been and us having to stay indoors, it does make it a challenge. But I kudos to a number of groups that have actually gone out there and done the work regardless, and they've really stepped up, like as first responders.
Very good. And anything before we call it a night here, Troy?
I mean, you just heard it. Take a look at that issue of food insecurity. That is one of the most pressing public health issues confronting Hudson County today. And in the midst of that, you have folk like Joe and others who are going out and doing their best alongside a range of stakeholders and excellent leaders to make sure that families are fed, that children have the nourishment they need, and that people can go to bed at night, hopefully with a full stomach and a better, happier heart. So moving forward, the question becomes, what can we do in 2021 to utilize the benefits of veterans to tackle some of these health issues, to tackle some of these challenges? And I think two things that came out in this conversation that you heard from Joe and me both are, one, identifying and nurturing leaders at the municipal and county levels and giving them opportunities through boards, councils, and other bodies of government to be nurtured, to shine, and to learn how to further lead in this context. And then secondly, once we do that, to identify credible messengers within the veteran space on issues that are native to the veteran space. Mental health, suicide prevention, homelessness, a range of health issues. We didn't get a chance to talk in this call about women's wellness, but there's extraordinary work happening in the veteran space right now throughout the tri-state area on that. There are folk who could be utilized, leveraged, and empowered to be credible messengers regardless of the audience. And we think, at least here at Weehawken and American Legion Post 18, and you can learn about our work at legionpost18.org. We think that there's a lot that our vets can bring to the fight for our communities, and we're just so grateful we have leaders like Joe Bello and others in our area who are helping lead the way and gave us a foundation for the work ahead.
All right, great. So obviously, first of all, well, I guess really last of all at this point, but thanks both of you, Joe, Troy. Really appreciated you guys giving me the time this evening. I think it was a pretty productive conversation. And just on a final note, certainly women's wellness, Troy, is something we'll talk about at a future date. But with that, thanks again, and I hope you guys have a great night.
Thank you.
All the best to you. Thank you. God bless.